will tell you one of the things that went wrong with science, in my opinion, and I try to explain it simply. What you see are a bunch of genomes here, right? These are genomes, and these letters, C, T, G, A, they're the code. Instead of 0 and 1s, we have a different code, really. And so what science did, the math that was thrust upon genome was so-called sequence alignment or comparative genome. So what did the scientists do? They said, okay, let's look at the mouse and at the beaver and at the human, and we will try to find common things, because almost all life has commonalities, significant commonalities in our code. So some of the modules that are used in the human are used in the mouse and are used elsewhere. And so these green parts are the parts that are aligned to each other, right? And the red parts. So we can use math, and there's no point in understanding what this math. It's not terribly complicated, just convoluted. But ultimately, the science said, okay, let us align these genomes, and because the things that are similar, let's say we have some section of a genome with the mouse in common. All of a sudden, scientists said, well, that must be conserved regions. What does it mean, conserved? Conserved means that you assume basically a Darwinian theory, Charles Darwin, of evolution, and therefore you say these genes have not changed, and therefore they're most important. Again, remember, like with the junk DNA, the problem is a human scientist thinks to say what's important before actually understanding the system. So a lot of the times, it was basically said that the things that different mammals share are the important part of the genome, and we just studied that, and really a lot of fake promises were made. Oh, we're going to cure cancer. Oh, we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. And in fact, our understanding is at child's level. Just because we said we think this is most important doesn't mean that it's really the most important things. I'll give you an analogy, right? A very simple analogy. Don't get into science, but we have a bicycle and a motorcycle. Let's say that I tell you that, well, obviously, if we working on the theory of evolution, that a bicycle somehow evolved into a motorcycle, it's obvious, right? They have very similar plan. So if you do a sequence alignment, you would align the wheels, right? The two wheels. You would align the handlebar. What else? The core structure. What would be your conclusion from that? That little thing hanging here in the motorcycle? Oh yeah, the engine. Well, that's junk because we couldn't align it. It's got to be junk. But that seems to me a very, very strange way. And the problem with a lot of the science is that it wants to pretend that it knows more than it does. Where I believe in the opposite. You have to actually start with humility and kind of try to learn. And some of the approaches we're proposing as scientists at WellAI are different, using genomics in a different way. I'll show you in a little bit. You cannot decide what is important just because you understand it, or just because you see it in many different places and you've learned it. It's familiar. Familiarity does not mean that this is important.